Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Wilbur Talks FPL, where we talk everything the Premier League and, of course, our beloved FPL. We are back for episode 23, and we are between game weeks 35 and 36, so we're going to be looking forward to a pretty big, biggest double game week of the season in game week 36, which we'll get onto later. We are half a man down, shall we say. We're joined by Charlie again. How are you, Charlie?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm not quite sure the maths checks out on that, saying we're half a man down when we're three normally, but never mind. Yeah, all good, thanks.
Yeah, well, it's like slightly 2.5 men, because Sam was planning to be on the pod, but he's having some audio issues, so he might pop in halfway through, but yeah, 2 or 2.5 at some point maybe, but we'll plod along and we'll see how we get along. And hopefully a lot of chat about the big double game week coming up. So we're going to have a quick, hopefully a brief look back at game week 35, just a bit of a single game week. We're not used to them anymore. We'll talk about Charlie smashing it again. Charlie was the planned quizmaster. I'm not sure if it messed up your quiz plans now, or we'll do something, Charlie, in the middle.
I can reroute it to just being against you, and you have to compete against yourself.
Oh, great. That sounds fun. And then we'll look a bit more detail into 36, take a look at the teams at double, and then look at different plans for different situations. Because I'm pretty sure you've got no chips left after Charlie, because you used your free hit, didn't you? Was it last week? Yeah. So you've used all your chips, and I've just got bench boost, which I'll be playing this week. And I know Sam also has bench boost, which I might have convinced him into playing this week, because I know he mentioned about playing it in 37, but he might make it for that point, and we can discuss that, but we'll touch on his team either way. So let's dive into it. And as I said, I feel like we have to start with the best score of the week. So as usual, we'll go to you, Charlie. Can talk to us about your game week 35, where I'm pretty sure if you added mine and Sam's totals together, it was basically yours.
Yeah, so I finished on 73 points. Yeah, like I say, obviously, it's really happy with that. Basically all came from, well, not even all, but over half of that was from the Son captain. So that was kind of my main good choice of the week, because I did have it on Kane basically the whole week leading up to it, and then pretty much on the day of the deadline, just decided I'd go edge it to Son. I thought, because the way Leicester play, they're a bit more open. I think Kane's better to go with if they're playing against a team with like a sort of low block or that kind of thing, whereas I think Leicester are just much more open and allow a lot more opportunities. And also, we know Leicester are pretty awful at set pieces, and Son's on a lot of those set pieces. So, yeah, pretty happy with that. That call. The rest of the team didn't provide too much. I had a few points here and there, so both Martinelli and Saka providing assists, got some clean sheets from Cash and Cancelo. That was a bit of an interesting one with the whole Digne situation. I don't think anyone saw that he was ready to play. Certainly not me. I transferred Digne out for Cash, which is netted me -2 points, because I think Digne picked up 2 bonus in that. But yeah, I'm not that bothered. I think I'm just happy to see the back of Digne anyway, so I'll take that anyway. So yeah, overall, yeah, pretty happy. Obviously, most of those points being scored from one player, but other than that, yeah. Good week for me, and that's kind of boosted me back up. So I think before the game week I was around mid-20s, maybe 30k, and now that's pushed me back to 16k at the moment. So yeah, nice little push before the last few game weeks.
That shot in the arm that you needed into to try. So what are you aiming for now? Are you top 10k, or what is your goal?
If I'm honest with myself, my aim every season is top 10k. If you asked me at the beginning of the season, I would normally just say 100k, top 100k, and then when I get into that in a season, I would then say my aim is top 10k. And I think, yeah, if I'm honest, my aim is always top 10k. So that will be the aim this season. And then yeah, just anywhere in the top 10k, and I'll be really happy about how it's gone.
Yeah, moving in the right direction again. As you kind of touched on, it's kind of all was on the Son move, wasn't it, really? Like captained him, having him in the first place. Because I was literally comparing the 3 of our teams, and it was literally Son was obviously the big difference across them all. So if I talk about mine and Sam's, because very similar at the same time. So I got 39 points, Sam got 38. So across the three of us, you had Son, you captained him. Sam had Son, didn't captain him, and I didn't have Son at all. So it's just a complete kind of view of every scenario. So half of Sam's score came from Son, 19 out of 38. And then there's very little around that, probably similar to yours, Saka, and then one clean sheet from Cucurella. So not a lot in Sam's. And then mine was, like I said, a very similar score, but I had some other players kind of chipping in to cover Son slightly. So I had Watkins that got 9 points, so that was decent. And I ended up captaining Cancelo, so he got a double clean sheet, which covered a bit more. So luckily the City clean sheet. But literally looking at my team, when you get 4 players who scored 1 point, you know it's been a bad week, really. Literally, Alonso, Mount, and Nketiah all got a bucket, and then obviously Salah. I wasn't too upset about that Salah one, to be fair, because it probably would have done a lot more harm than actually being on the pitch with not being captain. So, not great, and it's just the big Son issue really in the team, as we've spoken about. Is literally, if you had Son, you had a good week. If you didn't have Son, not so great. So I think I slipped about 20,000. I think I was about 240 ish, and now I'm just under 260. Yeah, so still in not the place where I want to be, but it's a big week this week with the bench boost. And as I mentioned last week, the highest I've been this season, which isn't fantastic, has been 177k. So that is the new target, and I'm hoping to get a decent boost this week, and then we'll go from there and see what we can do. But yeah, and also you mentioned your transfer. I think I titled the podcast last week the Coutinho or nothing, and I ended up going for Coutinho, which probably netted me, I think, 1 or 2 points, because he literally did nothing, and luckily Watkins got returned, so we did get something from those Villa guys. But I think I'd probably rather, I think you put a point in there when I was saying about it that Coutinho probably over these game weeks will score more than Havertz anyway, so it probably makes sense. And with Coutinho's double-double, it's not the worst one, he's just not on the best form. But as I said, he'll benefit in 37 as well, so we'll see, and hopefully get some points coming through in the next few weeks. So we'll touch a bit on some of the results quite briefly, because I want to spend more time on the latter half. So we'll focus on the key things. I'm not going to touch that much on the title race, because I think it was kind of as what we expected, where both teams won. I don't think Newcastle particularly impressive against Liverpool. We probably thought it was going to be a harder test than it actually was. But I'll let you talk about your favourite contests, Charlie. I'm sure you're happy getting away with a 2-1 at West Ham.
Yeah, it was interesting because once the lineups came out, I was a bit worried because I don't think West Ham rotated as much as everyone thought they would. There was still a pretty strong team, you know, Rice and Bowen, etc. It was only really from some of the sort of big players in their team. It was mainly Antonio being rested, but yeah, so that did worry me a little bit. And West Ham certainly started quite slowly as well, which could be expected because of their Europa commitments. But I think Arsenal did as well. Which there isn't really any excuse for. You know, we're playing 1 match a week, and it's clear what the motivation is. So you would hope they would take that to kind of start every game well at the beginning and trying to be on the front foot, and it just didn't really happen. And I think it kind of showed in that both our goals were effectively from set-piece situations and our centre-backs, and that's absolutely something that's been worked on in the team, and I was actually listening to an interview with Aaron Ramsdale today, and he was talking about how much time they're spending on set pieces and with the set piece coach. So that's become a huge part of the game, both attacking wise and defensively as well, because we're still yet to concede from a corner situation, which is pretty remarkable when you think of our defence a few years ago. So yeah, just another one of those really that's after the game you don't really reflect on how the game went or anything. It's just another 3 points in the bag that's needed and on to the next one really.
And I'm going to say Spurs keeping on the same kind of level as you as well. We're probably a more expected win against Leicester. Well, I think expecting rotation in both of those games, weren't we? It's a strange one with West Ham because I feel like we're saying they're always going to rotate, but we haven't seen that much rotation in any game they've actually played between Europe, because they kind of have, in my opinion, like a first 11 that's far superior to their actual reserve team. Like, so they tend to make maybe like 3 or 4 changes at maximum, and they don't change a lot. So it didn't particularly surprise me the lineup they put out. Debatable challenge by Ramsey that I mentioned to you earlier in the week, which he slightly got away with, but did what he needed to do, and no value in that game really for West Ham, although it probably secures Man United's 6th place, so we can avoid the Conference League at least. It's bad times when you're having to rely on the Europa League, but but yeah, it's probably a crunch week, isn't it, in the top 4 race this week, especially Spurs going to Anfield. I think they've really got to get something in that game to keep them in it, but well, especially if you get a result against Leeds coming up, so right before the North London derby as well.
Yeah, exactly that, because that can, if we get the win and they lose against Liverpool, which I think, if on paper that's probably how you would expect those 2 games to go, I think that completely changes the way I think particularly Arsenal will view that. Well, and both teams really would view that North London derby, in that Arsenal would be very happy just drawing that game and even would be able to go away with a loss. Whereas Spurs will have to win that game if they lose against Liverpool. So, and that will suit Arsenal, because I think both Arsenal and Tottenham going into that game against each other will both want to be playing on the counter in that game. I think that's when both teams are at their best. So, yeah, if Arsenal go into that game being able to kind of sit tight, defend, and then hit on the counter, that would be ideal, really. So, yeah, this game, the games at the weekend preceding that, will make a big difference to how that game goes, I reckon.
It's quite an interesting game, I think, that Spurs-Liverpool game. I think it'll be more even than people think. And obviously there's the big threat of Son and Kane on the break. I'm pretty sure it was the game this season, the reverse fixture, where Spurs were just absolutely all over Liverpool for like the first half. Just breaking between the lines a lot of the time. So it'll be interesting, especially because Spurs obviously playing once a week compared to Liverpool having a slightly tougher game than we expected in Spain, even though they've got a bit of a rest in between. So it's kind of like all or nothing for Spurs, isn't it? I feel like they've got to go for it in that game. So it will be very interesting. It could be one that decides the title race at the same time. I think the one last fight I just wanted to touch on is obviously the relegation fight. So if I was saying to you, give it to you, Charlie, I can't even spit it out there. If I was say to you, Charlie, which one is going down out of Burnley, Leeds and Everton, which are you saying at this point in time?
So this is interesting, because I think... So last week when I think we talked about this, I said Everton. I still do think they'll go down, but I even didn't really think about it properly last week, that I didn't quite appreciate how close Leeds are to being in that drop zone. So they're only 2 points off Everton at the moment, and Everton have a game in hand. Not that necessarily means anything, because Everton are playing poorly enough to not be guaranteed any points in any game. So I think I would just about stick to Everton, but it's, like last week I was talking about how I felt like Burnley were clear to kind of get out of that, as opposed to Everton, because of their play style and because they just have that little bit more kind of gritty determination about them, whereas like I was saying last week, Everton a bit more kind of mid-table, pushing Europa places, of just playing or trying to play, maybe they don't actually do it, but trying to play a bit nicer football rather than having to squeeze out wins and points where they can. You would apply that similar thing to Leeds as well, so it does make it quite interesting that they're both in and around there. Leeds' goal difference significantly worse as well. I think you could almost put them, because of the game in hand, you could probably almost put them on a level playing field at the moment, and a complete 50-50 between the two. But I think I'll just stick with Everton, because I think it's the points on the board as opposed to the game in hand really that's going to make the difference. But yeah, Leeds by no means out of it. But I do think Burnley, like I say, just they're on a bit of a roll now. 3 wins in 3. They've just got that little bit extra, I think, that can and maybe just experience of being in and around there as well, that will just help them.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the top 4. It's just all on this week again, I think, because I was just looking at the schedule for the next week, and Leeds and Everton have got 2 games, one Sunday and one on Wednesday, both play at the same time as well. So you can see big swings literally in the same hours of the game weeks, because you've got like Sunday, Leeds are at your home, shall we say, and then Everton are away at Leicester, which you could see a rotated Leicester team there, so you could see a big swing just on that day. And then Leeds have got Chelsea, not sure what team Chelsea are going to put out, and then Everton are away at Watford. So if you looked at those 2 fixtures on paper, Everton against Watford and Leicester compared to Leeds against Arsenal and Chelsea, you'd be saying that Everton have definitely got a fighting chance. I think it very much depends on that Chelsea lineup that they put out, because that's literally a few days before the cup final as well. So it's going to be one of those. They used to do it, didn't they? Where like if you kind of put a below strength team out, that they'd actually like fine you, because it can like affect the results, couldn't it? But I think you could argue with Chelsea that probably you wouldn't say which is their actual first team. You could see like in previous seasons where you could see like a big drop off if someone put their second team out, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think, and also at this point, because of the budgets of not even just the top end of the Premier League, but just all the teams in the Premier League, I think there's enough squad depth to rotate without having to, like you say, those kind of teams that got fined. I think that's mostly in the Championship that stuff like that's happened, or below, where it has literally been like youth players playing. You might see a few of those and some second string first team, but yeah, I don't think anyone in the Premier League has to go too far. They can just rotate fairly easily.
Yeah, I think it's probably more like 10 or more years ago in the Premier League where they didn't really have these vast squads. So there was a big drop-off between the first and the second 11s, but not seen it in a long time. But just interesting, because Leeds at home can probably do well against anyone, and obviously if they're playing a more weaker Chelsea, they'll feel like they could get a result in that one compared to if Chelsea had something to play for. But it's just one to keep an eye out for. So there's not really anything else I wanted to touch upon in the previous week's fixtures. Anything that you wanted to touch on that was there, Charlie?
No, not from that. Just a quick Real Madrid-Man City update. Still 0-0 in this tie, but Benzema has just been hit in the balls. So nice little update there for you. He is struggling.
Thanks for that. A big development there. I thought you were going to say that as a red card or something when you were like, no goals.
No.
Well, yeah, that's his eyes might be slightly watering now, shall we say. Yeah, so that rounds off what we wanted to discuss on the previous week. So this will be the natural place where we would insert quiz. So I'm handing over to you, Charlie.
Yeah, well,
hello.
There we go. I was going to say, I did think just at the right moment.
You could smell it, couldn't you?
Quiz.
You could smell the quiz when he was here.
The setup I have managed to improvise right now is the most unorthodox I've ever had in my life. I have headphones into a speaker, into another speaker, into the computer, talking into my mobile phone. So I have no idea. Yeah, I can't see anything at the minute other than the chat, but I'm going to try. And sorry for all of this.
No worries. Nice you to join us. We've kind of touched on it last week. I kind of touched on your team when we went through it, and then you've literally come when it's quiz time. So it's as if you knew it was coming. But welcome.
Right, yeah, so I'll take this away then. So, of course, with the quiz between you two, it had to be a Man U v Liverpool quiz.
As long as it's not this season.
No. I have a list of 30 goal scorers that have scored in Liverpool v Man U or Man U v Liverpool games. That takes us back to since the start of the 2013-14 season. So that's the last 9 seasons. And it's in all competitions. So I can give you a breakdown of that. That's 18 Premier League games. That's 2 Europa League games. That's 2 International Champions Cup, which I am including just because it gives a few more left field answers. one League Cup game and one FA Cup game that they have played in that time. As I say, 30 different goal scorers. Just to clarify, so for example, if you did say someone that scored, say, in the 2012 season, who then didn't score again after that, they would be incorrect. It's people from 2013-14 onwards that have scored in Liverpool v Man U games or Man U v Liverpool games. Are we happy with that? Is that clear for everyone?
Well, can I just clarify that game? So you said, like, I think you said 18 in the league, 2 in Europa. So that third one, what was that competition you said, sorry?
It was the International Champions Cup, which I think was just like a friendly tournament.
So it's like a pre-season kind of friendly thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's literally, the data that I've got is literally every game that's been played between Man U and Liverpool since 2013, the start of 2013-14, which happened to include those 2 International Cup games.
Okay, so how many did you say there is? 30?
30 different goal scorers. Because of the hardship that Sam has gone to join the call, I will give him the choice to either go first or second. Up to you, Sam.
No, I will go first, I think.
Okay, and also what we'll do, we'll say if you do say an incorrect answer, you are out immediately because we want to move this along quite quickly. But also, I'll give you both one duplication, and then if you do a second one, then that's you out.
Fine.
That's fine.
So
how many did you say there were? 30?
30 different goal scorers there have been.
Oh, I've got a lot. Let's go. Right, let's start off with Luis Suarez.
He has indeed. Only one, so that just gauges a bit for you. He has scored 1 goal in that time in Liverpool v Man U games.
I feel like I'm going to struggle big time with this because I feel like the high proportion of them are Liverpool players, which is slightly concerning.
Yep, certainly the more recent ones have been heavy on Liverpool. Which says how everything's gone.
Yeah, I guess you are going to 13-14, so you've got a slight overlap. I'm just going to have to gauge when we get later on. But I'm going to start by stealing some obvious answers from Sam. So obviously Salah.
Indeed, top of the list with 9 goals.
Jota.
Yes, Jota scored 2.
Trying to think who scored in the most recent ones just to get them off the table. But most of the time when I've been watching them recently, I just turn the game off. So who the hell even scored in that most recent one? You're trying to make it quick and I'm going to struggle when I'm on the second one. So it's Jota. Surely the other part of your front three has got to have scored at least once. So go with Mane.
He has indeed. He has scored 3.
Van Dijk.
Van Dijk is a great answer. That's 1. He has scored. Oh, I'll add this in as well. Actually, I'll add it in after you go, Will. Then it's even.
Okay. So it's bad when I'm struggling even to think. Surely Bruno's got to have scored. Surely. The thing is, I can't actually remember how many seasons ago it was that we scored. I can't remember last season. Let's stick with Liverpool then, shall we? Suarez, God. Yeah, you say it's going to be a quick one, but this is clearly I'm not used to getting quizzed. I'm used to quizzing you two.
Well, I meant quick as in we'll get to a loser quicker than doing a few rounds.
I can't even think who would actually score for us. This is quite concerning already. And Sam sat there with his massive list of players. Who else would score for Liverpool? I can't even think who scored this season. Because Salah scored 4, didn't he, in that one earlier in the season? The thing is, when it gets that bad in terms of result, I just turn off. Oh God, this is horrendous. That's why you don't quiz me. I'm struggling to gauge what kind of years all these players were in there as well.
If this was a countdown, the sound would be playing right now.
For me now.
For the third time.
Firmino.
Firmino is correct. 3 goals he has scored.
I'm trying to think who was bumming in there before Jota, and it's not that long ago. Bumming out.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Give me 1 second. He is not on my list.
No.
Cristiano Ronaldo
Did he
has not scored. against Liverpool.
A disaster.
That is a win for
Well,
Wilbur.
that's a disaster.
by default, when he said that, I was like, that's wrong because I know Ronaldo. But didn't Ronaldo go
I'm
in?
sure he scored at Old Trafford. Oh no, it got ruled out. That's a disaster.
Yeah, I knew he hadn't scored recently. I was like, the period he gave, he left before then.
That is pain.
There are a lot of quite, if you're going to think of obvious answers, so I can go through
I'm
quickly.
happy to go on a few more, like say I've won and then just have a few guesses. Like you can have another guess if you want, Sam. You'll have a few more than me.
Well, I've got a few more. Yeah, that's annoying. Rashford.
Rashford, indeed, he is second on the list with 5.
God, that's a big amount. 5. Surely Bruno, I'm assuming at some point.
Bruno has, yes, he is on 2.
I want to say Trent.
Trent has not scored.
Okay, well, would have been out at that point anyway.
I'm struggling to gauge 13, 14 because I feel like when you get into that end, there will be quite a few United players.
I think there are some obvious United players from that era that have scored in this fixture.
I'm just struggling with the strikers.
Rooney
has, yep. Rooney has scored 3.
Because what I'm struggling with is when Berbatov was there.
Tevez is not on the list.
Is that past Berbatov's time?
It is past Berbatov.
Yeah. Because all I remember is his hat-trick against Liverpool, so it just came to my mind.
Shall I just list the remaining
just
ones?
list them off if you want. Yeah,
so just going down in order. So Sturridge has got 4, Mata's got 4, Gerrard's got 3, Shaqiri with 3, Lingard with 2, Martial with 2, Greenwood with 1, Lallana with 1, Keita with 1, Pereira with 1, Diaz with 1, obviously, recently.
Never got Pereira.
Ojo with 1. That was why I included the International Champions Cup. This was the stipulation which I actually forgot to give you, but I was going to include own goals. So Bailly got 1 effectively. Milner with 1, Ibra with 1, Coutinho with 1, Blind with 1, Herrera with 1, Benteke with 1, Van Persie with 1, and Javier Hernandez with 1. And those are your 30 goal scorers.
Yeah, I couldn't gauge it with what strikers were there around that period, so I was stuck between a Berbatov or a Van Persie.
Well, I believe that Ronaldo.
That's quite the scenes with
all the players to bring you down as well. Fantastic.
No, I know. That's right. He'll be gone next year, so he can't do it anymore.
Still the goal, so carry on. But yeah,
very good.
Thank you for that, Charlie, and thank you for that win there, Sam.
You're glad you joined for that? Made all the effort to
absolutely
get the wrong answer.
Definitely win by default there. I was in deep trouble. That probably would have only lasted a few more. But yeah, thank you for that, Charlie. And we will move on to the second part of the pod where we're going to look forward to game week 36. So I think I just want to kind of put our teams into perspective before we start talking about different teams and different ways we're looking at. So as Sam has joined us, do you want to give us an idea of your plans going forward for this game week, Sam? I know you talked to us earlier in the week because you've still got bench boost to use. So currently, what are you going towards in terms of transfers, and if you're playing that bench boost this week or 37?
Well, that's the money question, really. I think I might use it this week, just because ultimately my season is now down to whether or not I can beat Matt in the family league, and I need to. He ate into what I built up a pretty nice cushion ahead of last week, and he ate into that a little bit this week, which is a bit of a pain. But I'm not too confident on Havertz or Maddison anymore in terms of selection, given that they've got the cup final coming up. I don't know how much of that you already covered, but I think those two might be ones to bite the bullet. I'm thinking Coutinho, and I'm thinking Kulusevski. I want to do Foden, like you said the other day. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's very much dependent on what happens tonight. I think it's still 0-0 might be half time now in the Real Madrid game. If Man City get knocked out tonight, I will probably go Foden, because at which point City, if City don't go through today, they just full send everything to make sure they win the Premier League. and Foden is in Man City's strongest 11. So if that does happen and they get knocked out, I think all of a sudden City assets are like, yes, please give me some of that. But if they go through, then I think there's an element of managing minutes of certain players up to what will ultimately be their biggest game in the club's history, really, because they've got to a Champions League final and lost one. They've got to win this year's Champions League, you'd say, Man City. And I think City's sort of string of second-tier players are probably good enough to see out the games they've got for the remainder of the Premier League season. I think it's going to be really difficult for anything other than City to win the league now. So in terms of how that looks for me, I think Coutinho is almost a cert. And then I quite like Kulusevski because of the Spurs doubles. And also Matt has him, so I'd cover him off on that aspect. So I think that's the way I'm going to go. So it's probably going to be Havertz and Maddison for Kulusevski and Coutinho. Depending on what happens in the Champions League game tonight, then it might be Coutinho and Foden.
Yeah, and maybe around Maddison as well, because he's got the European game as well, hasn't he? But either way.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Maddison, I just don't like Leicester assets now going in because none of us really know what team they're going to play from week to week as it is, let alone throw in a European element in there. If they do get through to the final, Leicester assets are pretty much roulette. So
definitely. So if you was doing that kind of strategy, are you abandoning the bench boost, or would you still be looking to? Because at the minute you've got Livramento and some even player I don't even know, striker. I think it's a Brentford fodder striker.
Yeah, young Coombs.
Young Coombs.
I think it's going to be very hard for me to make enough changes so that I can play the bench boost this week. But equally, having said that, I don't really want to wait till next week to play it. So, it's a bit of a tough one. I don't want to take too many more hits, as it were, to get these guys in. But also, I don't want to leave it too late and end up paying the price that way.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it?
Bit of a sticky situation, yeah.
But I think, because when I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, you're going to have a lot more fixtures either way if you play it this week rather than next week, aren't you? Even if you left one of those fodder players, or I'd argue you just leave Havertz or Maddison in there because they'll probably play one of the games, which is better than a Livramento or a Young's, whatever his name is. But I'm not sure what Charlie thinks on that point as well.
Yeah, I agree, to be honest. Obviously, it depends who's coming in. The other thing I have to say, actually, that I was looking at before about Man City in particular, bringing in a Man City asset, not only, and with all the sort of tonight's games aside and thing, because obviously we have to wait until see what happens. But it's also, not only do they have the double this week, but then the following week they have West Ham, and that's West Ham playing. If we assume West Ham get through, and again, that's not by any means a certainty, but if they get through in Europa, they play their final a few days after that Man City game. So you can guarantee, I know we talked about some rotation earlier, but when it's a few days before playing a cup final that would get them into Champions League, I would see complete changes in that game. And Man City will, by all estimations, still be going for the title at that point. So I could see an absolute battering in that game. So I think, depending on what happens tonight, if it makes sense to go for Man City assets, I think I would be happy taking hits for Man City assets this week.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I feel like the bench boost, you can have a better chance of getting more points this week because you're limiting yourself next week, because you've got 12 teams doubling this week compared to next week, where I think there's about 6 or 8, is there? And they're not really the big teams. So I think definitely the bench boost, you should be trying to facilitate that where possible, because I think you've got 2 frees, haven't you? So I think I suggested it earlier in the week, didn't I, about probably getting rid of one of those midfielders and then changing the 2 on the bench.
True.
But depending on what players we end up with, I think midfield is a bit of a dilemma, which we'll get to on my team as well, because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing in my midfield.
Yeah.
Well, I'll touch on mine now because we're both, well, you're possibly on bench boost, and then I will definitely be on bench boost. So, because I only wildcarded 2 weeks ago, currently every player I've got will double in this game week, but it's just, I'm a bit concerned about some of the actual players in there. I'm not too concerned about my defence. So in defence, I've got Cancelo, Laporte, Trent, which perfectly fine. Alonso, I think he'll play at least one game. He might even play both. I'm not sure. And then I've just got Emerson Royale, who I'm not convinced by, but for that like 4.5, there's not a lot of different options that I think are worthwhile changing him for. And then it's midfield where I'm just there's a Sterling sized issue in my team, and I'm like, should this Sterling be in my team or should I get rid of him for someone else? And I think I wanted him to start tonight just so I could get rid of him. I was saying it to Charlie before we started. But so my current dilemma is, should I get rid of Sterling? Basically, with Sterling, I could go to any player in the game except for KDB, which is slightly annoying. I could go straight to Son and obviously anyone below Sterling's value, or I could do 2 transfers to, for example, go Sterling to someone lower down like a Saka, who I don't have in my team, and then upgrade like a Pookie to Richarlison. So I'm a bit undecided because Sterling is the one stinking up my team, and I think he'll play the home against Newcastle, and the only way he'll probably play the other game is if he hits a hat-trick. So we're dreaming a bit there. So I think you said earlier in the week, Charlie, didn't you, that it looks fine, but I think it's that Sterling that's just putting me off a bit. Should I stick with Sterling, or what do you think?
It's impossible to answer, really.
Yeah.
I think, I guess the issue is not only not being sure of starts for him, but also the value.
Yeah.
Because he is a lot, and particularly you don't have Son, right? And
no, I can just easily switch to Son. Like I can get. To
I'm not necessarily saying that move in particular, but if you compare the two, I think you'd be much happier having Son than having Sterling. And yeah, I wouldn't. No, it's difficult. I wouldn't necessarily advocate bringing Son in this week necessarily. I think I think the Liverpool game in particular is probably actually a good one for Son because they will come at Spurs and that will suit Spurs. Whereas, like we talked about earlier in the pod, dependent on how that Liverpool game goes will determine how the Arsenal game goes in terms of whether Arsenal need to come out and play for the win or play for a draw. But I think, I mean, it's really difficult, and particularly like you say, with him not starting today in the Champions League, you've got to think he plays at least or starts at least one of those 2 fixtures this week. So it's a toss-up of whether who you're bringing in is going to net you enough points to kind of counteract that. So yeah, I don't think there is a right answer, to be honest. It's a flip of coin.
Yeah, I'm scarred from the last 2 weeks where City have scored 9 goals and he's not got a goal or assist out of any of those 9 goals, and he's been on the pitch the whole time. It's like, that's a nightmare when you bring in that kind of asset open. He kind of does well for you. But so follow-up question just to Charlie saying about that. So if, for example, if we found Sterling was injured, what other midfielder would you go to? So I currently have Salah, obviously, Coutinho, Mount, and then Dewsbury Hall. If you was going to any other midfielder, who would you go for? Bear in mind, I also don't have Saka.
It's a tough question. I think I probably wouldn't be getting another Chelsea asset. I think they do have good fixtures, but you said you already have Mount there. I don't think you need another one.
Yeah, just get rid of Havertz. I don't want another one.
Exactly, yeah. And they're not necessarily exactly firing on all cylinders either. They seem to be slipping up. Maybe the fact that they have slipped up so much will sort of fire them back into life, realising that they could actually lose third place potentially. I think it is Man City. I think that is the most appetising place to go in terms of potential returns. It's just trying to get who starts. So I think, like Sam said earlier, if Man City get knocked out, then I would probably be going Foden. I think, yeah, outside of him, and you said he can't stretch to KDB, it's difficult to nail down someone that's definitely going to play those two fixtures. But I think Man City would be or have the biggest potential upside. So I think I'd be focusing on them, even though that is going to be a bit of a wild ride, as you found out with Sterling.
Yeah, you can't say City the option when Sterling's starting in my team, because I'm just like, no, he's not the right one.
The right City option, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the issue. I'll probably transfer Sterling to Foden and Sterling will get a hat-trick. That's what happened last time.
Yeah, that is the risk you run with Man City.
I don't know. It's a difficult one. I can get to KDB for a hit, but it's like, should I really be swapping double game week players for double game week players for a hit? But it's a strange one. With that question, I was trying to help Sam with his question as well, what midfielder to get. I'm not sure you really helped us at the same time.
No, I think, yeah, like I say, I think there isn't really a right answer at this point. And also, like we say as well, the Man City game, or the outcome of that, and in terms of substitutions and whatever, could make everything we've said irrelevant if they're, maybe they go a few goals up in a few minutes' time, and then Foden gets an early sub, and then he's a lock, or the same for KDB or something like that. So,
thoughts on Jacob Ramsey versus Coutinho as a selection? Ramsey at 4.7 is obviously significantly cheaper than Coutinho.
I think I'd rather have Gordon from Everton at that price. That I'm putting out there.
I think I would if it was me, I would probably be choosing between Ramsey and Gordon, because of what I feel like you can do with those extra funds. Mm-hmm. And I think purely on fixtures, yeah, it makes sense to go for one of those two teams. I just don't think I've seen enough from Coutinho to warrant what is he, around 7.5, 8?
Yeah, I think he's bang on 7. I think now,
which is obviously a significant more amount above. So that could be enough to move you to a upper echelon midfielder instead elsewhere. So yeah, I think I would be happy to go with those value picks, providing you're then using that money elsewhere into one of the big boys. Yeah,
so for example, could do Ramsey in for Maddison, and then Young Coombs for. I could do Livramento, Young Coombs, and Maddison out, and then Ramsey, Laporte, and Jesus in, which I think makes a bit of sense. Assuming City get knocked out tonight, which I think they will. Come on, Real Madrid.
Yeah, Jesus is a fruity one, that one. I don't mind either two.
There just aren't many strikers around that. Like, I mean, other than maybe Ollie Watkins, it's like a terrible shout, I guess, but no one's playing for anything. no one in the game, no one left in the game has anything really to play for that warrants them potentially getting a hoard of points that isn't already in another competition with contemplating rotation. So it's just an insane situation. Everton are basically safe now. Already have Weghorst and Dennis.
Already safe.
Yeah, they're safe. The other two are done. Everton needed one win, they're done. It's the relegation scrap's over. If Everton bottle it from here, it'll be impressive.
But Everton needed at least 2 more wins, so isn't a Richarlison a good bet if you were looking for a striker?
Can't pick Richarlison. It's not possible. It's not possible. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. Everton, yeah. I think Watford beat. I think Everton beat Watford, and I think Leicester are on the beach, so Everton could quite possibly beat Leicester. But I can't pick Richarlison. I could maybe go Gordon at a stretch, but Richarlison's just.
Would it feel like a dirty win in your FPL league, Sam, if you managed to win it by having Richarlison, who keeps Everton up?
I'm prepared to do many dirty things, such as just basically just cover Matt's team for the rest of the season if needed. I could do it for a 16-point hit and just get the same team to ensure victory. The gap's 20 points. So, but I don't know. I feel like the
But Richarlison is not one of those things.
Richarlison, I couldn't even do Richarlison. I wouldn't even bring Richarlison in if you gave me an extra free transfer just to bring him in. I'd rather have Dennis.
No, but what if Matt brought in Richarlison and then he beat you in the league and Everton stayed up because he had Richarlison?
It's all right, because he's a Liverpool fan as well, so I would forever have that in the locker. I'm like, it's all right, don't worry. It took you flipping blue nose to catch up. But no, I don't. Richarlison's not an option for me. He's probably a very good FPL option in terms of if you're playing this game with a sensible head on. But my sensible head went a long time ago, unfortunately.
We put it in there, okay, there's an option, and you just battered it back, so at least we brought it up. If he was in my situation, Sam, go on.
No, I think Richarlison makes sense. It's logical that Everton need to score goals to stay up. They're still in the relegation zone, right? They've got a game in hand, but they're going to need another win from somewhere. I just think they'll get it now. Looking at the games they've got left, Leicester on the beach, Watford, rubbish, Brentford at home, Brentford on the beach, Palace at home, they're on the beach, and Arsenal away, who will have top four done by that point. So if they can't get probably 2 wins out of them 5, they don't really deserve to stay up.
It's slightly different take to what we had, but I think they still need at least 2 wins to stay up, so that's what they need, the goals, like you said. So Richarlison, I think, is a good pick, especially if he picks up a flow and gets another photogenic image. What was I going to say then? Yeah, I was just going to say, Sam, so if he was in my situation, what would you do with Sterling? Ship him out?
Raheem the Rat, what would we do with him? I don't actually mind Sterling. The thing with Sterling is, I think I just feel like he's overpriced in FPL given the rotation. Every year, I think he's overpriced. I actually think he offers the same potential returns as like a Mahrez, and I don't know what Mahrez is priced at. I think he's like probably something like 8, maybe 8.5.
Like
don't imagine he's much more.
Yeah.
And what's Sterling, like 10 just over 10, something like that?
Yeah, I think it's 10.5 and 8.5. Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, exactly. I can't. I think they had the same like selection potential, pretty much. I don't know. I like Sterling. I do like Sterling. As much as that pains me to admit, but he just doesn't get the amount of returns that like someone like Son does at that price range. If you haven't got Son, I would go Son for Sterling. But if you have got Son, then I would just. I mean, that seems to me to be the no-brainer. Personally, depends what happens tonight. But the thing is with Sterling, even if City got knocked out tonight, there's no guarantee Sterling's going to play. I don't think Sterling's necessarily in Man City's best 11. Like he might be, but he might not be. It's like very situational. And yeah, I don't know. I personally wouldn't be looking to bring Sterling in now. I think if you wanted to take a punt on a Man City rotation, Foden or Mahrez are probably better at the punt because they're cheaper and just allows you to free up the money to put elsewhere. And there's a very obvious direct swap from Sterling to Son, in my opinion.
That confused me even more. I don't know at this point. I had 2 kind of. Well, if I was going to take it was either Son with like would that just be my free transfer, or it would be take a hit to get rid of Sterling and Mount and bring in Saka and KDB, or
I don't think you need Saka. I think you need Son more than you need Saka. I think you'll get some red arrows without Son.
Okay.
Basically, if you didn't have Son before last week, all the casuals have got Son in now because he scored 19 points. So like, the amount of transfers in on Son is going to be crazy. I don't know the exact number. Mount's going to play, and there's a chance that he's going to score. I think there's probably the same. The stats probably won't back it up, but I think looking at it from my point of view, I think there's probably similar attacking return potential for Mount and Saka. Not a million miles apart, but Sterling might not even play. And Son, as we quite rightly pointed out, is going to have an absolute field day off the left-hand side against Trent and a high Liverpool line, and then goes in against Arsenal in arguably the most important game that Tottenham or Arsenal have been involved in a number of years, to be honest. So I think Son's the one, and then Son with Burnley at home and Norwich away in 37 and 38, of which Spurs are probably going to need to win both of to get into the top four and hope Arsenal slip up somewhere. So yeah, that would be what I'm thinking about. If I had Sterling at the moment, I think the obvious move is just swap to Son.
You're making a compelling case, Ian. Yeah, I think Sterling will probably play 1 out of 2, which obviously he's not really a double game week player, so it's not ideal. Would you add anything to the Son debate there, Charlie?
No, all great points by Sam. I think anything more we speak about it, we're just confusing it further. So I think that's good.
Yeah, me and Sam are just going to be confused the rest of the week, waiting for the City result and maybe Leicester for Sam as well. So go to a more.
Madison's out. Madison's done.
I think we'll go to simpler options and go to you, Charlie. You haven't got to worry about bench boost. It's just playing normal FPL. So what are your plans?
Well, yeah, quite. It's a little bit by design as well, I have to say, because I looked ahead to what my team would look like a few weeks ago. Because earlier in the season, I had been talking about likely free hitting in 36, but looked at my team as it was going into 36, and I was happy with it. So I ended up using my free hit earlier in the season in 34. So yeah, as I say, I'm fairly happy with my team this week. Despite Sam's protestations, I am likely getting Richarlison in, barring any potential FA ban for the whole Flair situation. But it looks like that's not coming.
Yeah, I think it hasn't been fined and given a warning. I think it's been.
Yeah, that's the word I think I've seen, and I think also there's probably an element, not that it should come into their thinking, but I think it's inevitable that they've been thinking about the fact that Everton are where they are, and if they were to give him a ban, that would very likely probably seal their fate, because like Sam said, they really need to be scoring goals if they want to stay up. So yeah, it is quite likely that I'll do Kane to Richarlison, and then use the extra money either to go for a Man City midfielder or defender. Again, like we keep caveating, based on the outcome of tonight's game. But I think for the double, the Man City's defensive options probably do better. But I think, like I made the point earlier about that West Ham game, I really want a Man City attacker going into that game. And I'll still have the option to do that if I were to. So basically this week I'll either go Richarlison plus a Man City defender, and then the following week bring in the Man City attacker with the money I'll have left over, or the vice versa and go for a Man City attacker this week and then a Man City defender the following week. Because yeah, I just think like we've said a few times over the last few weeks, I think it's just important going in on those players that still have things to play for. So my team's mostly made up of Liverpool, City, Spurs, Arsenal, and then it will now be Everton as well. All of who have various things to still play for. With Villa in there as well, based on the fixtures and a potential. I don't think anyone really considers them at all in the race for relegation at all, but there's a potential, I guess, for them to slip in if they were to have a poor few performances. But yeah, pretty comfortable where I'm at, I think. And yeah, I think a week like this, like you said, because there's just so many fixtures and what is it, 12 teams, I think, doubling.
Yeah.
I'm not bothered at all about taking -4. I think anything more than that you're maybe getting into the territory of, is it really worth it for this week and then only 2 weeks after that as well? But yeah, I think particularly this week, there's absolutely no issue taking -4 if it improves your team enough.
Yeah, I was kind of conflicted with that because I was like, I'm on a bench boost, so I also want to maximise it. But I'm like, all my players have a double fixture. Obviously, some of them might not play the double fixture, but should I really be swapping double game weekers for double game weekers when you might not actually gain anything? So I might just end up making a one transfer and not having to deal with the hits. Because like you said, I feel like there's going to be at least probably the average will be -4, probably not probably more than that, I'd expect. I saw a stat earlier as well, Charlie. Are you scared of your chances in the top 10, getting to the top 10k when 40% of the top 10k haven't used the bench boost yet?
Not necessarily, to be honest. I appreciate the point. I think, firstly, again, I think we've talked about it before. I think the bench boost is overrated because people do tend to either take hits or do things to try and accommodate the bench boost that ultimately lose points rather than gain them. But also, yeah, I'm happy with where my team's at, and compare. I don't think I'll lose out on maybe some points, but not too many. And like we've seen with someone like Sam's team, where you either have to take hits to address the bench, or you're playing bench boost in not as an ideal week. So I think there's enough there to make me still feel okay about how I'm going forward with no chips.
Yeah, you missed the first bit, Sam, where we were just discussing Charlie doing well as usual, and they flew up the rankings into, what was it, 16k you said it was? So
yeah, just about 16.5k, I think.
Yeah, within
Very nice.
within firing distance of that top 10k, so he's gone in for that. But we'll see how it turns out over this probably killer game week either way. It would go fantastically or fantastically badly, I think. Well, as we mentioned, the biggest game week of the season with 12 teams doubling, so it's going to be a monster. I can imagine there'll be some monster scores. So I just wanted to dive a bit further into the double game week. As we mentioned, there's 12 teams doubling, so I just wanted to touch on a few of the teams and just talk about a few of the assets from there. And I also want to bear in mind that quite a few people will probably be using a free hit. So there's just a few talking points around certain teams. So we've kind of touched on some of the teams so far. So if we're talking about Man City, if you could go for any assets in a Man City, I think the key question is probably, would you go like for double defence, go for double midfield? Even Sam suggesting Jesus. So Sam, if you was picking the best, well, I'm saying it to both of you now, and we're currently during a Champions League tie, so you're going to have to kind of put a bit of context to it at the same time. But if you were to pick 3 assets, Sam, for this double game week from City, what 3 would you be going for at this point in time?
Well, sorry, you cut out halfway through that. I'm going to ask you to repeat that.
That's fine.
Sorry.
I'll say no.
Something about City and something about assets was all I got from that, in amongst a load of background noise.
That summed it up quite well.
I tell you the answer. The answer is not Sterling.
Yeah. I basically said, what would be your top 3 City assets for this game week if you could choose any? Obviously, they're playing currently now, so you're going to have to take it with a pinch of salt when we're saying it, but who would you be going for as your top 3 in any position?
In any position?
Yeah.
Well, I'll just go one from each. Well, okay, Cancelo. If I could get him in, I would.
Mm-hmm.
If I knew he was going to play, Foden. I also think Foden's more likely to play off that sort of rotatable crew. And probably De Bruyne. Just tends to come up clutch in the big moment. I expect he's probably putting in a worldy performance at the moment in the Bernabeu. I think those 3.
Definitely a solid 3 there. I don't think you go very far wrong with those 3. Would yours be similar to that, Charlie, or would you maybe swap it up for like a double defence?
I think I would go double defence. I think based on what I said earlier, I think the fixtures that they've got suit themselves better to being more reliant, or how am I going to phrase this? But you're more likely to be able to guarantee clean sheets from those games than you are lots of goals. I know that's stupid saying it for City, who could probably score 5 against anyone. But I think, and also we have tended to see in previous double game weeks, specifically for Man City, and I think just in general, that defenders that play both and get clean sheets in both, and they usually end up with bonus points as well. They do tend to do pretty well. I can think of a few where Laporte's got the highest points from the game week, and I think Edison even one time.
I remember John Stones last season, didn't he?
John Stones,
yeah, get a goal or 2,
something like that. So I think, and also because there's just a little bit less chance of rotation. I think obviously in the situation with, or like the case we're talking about here is if you had sort of a free hit, for example, and were able to just kind of choose completely based on what's happened, like we're talking about tonight, and you could make a decision at the very last minute. I think maybe you'd be more comfortable going with someone like Sam said, with Foden and KDB as double attacking, because you could probably guarantee that they're likely to play the majority of those 2 games. But I think my preference would be just to play a little bit safer and go with the double defence, because there's a little less options. There's a bit more injuries. Kyle Walker's having a tough time at the moment, I've seen. He's looks like he's been hobbling basically since the end of the first half. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Cancelo, definitely the first name that I put in. But I think if it was a completely free choice for me, I'd probably go Cancelo, Laporte and KDB, I think. Because I think KDB gets routes into the attacking options regardless of who it comes from. I think everything will go through him. And then those would be Laporte and Cancelo would be my defenders of choice.
Yeah, I agree with the double defence, mainly because I'm biased because I've got Cancelo and Laporte, so I would take that with a pinch of salt, so I'm obviously going to say that. And as Sam said, Sterling is definitely not the option, so I'm on the wrong attacking option, but I think I'm probably on the right defensive options. And as you touched on, so City are at home to Newcastle and away to Wolves in their double, so I'd say amongst the big teams who've got something to play for, that's probably by far the best double that we've got there. And like you said, probably a good chance of getting a clean sheet in both. Wolves don't score many goals, and the fact that they've got Newcastle at home rather than at Newcastle's probably makes it an even better fixture. So I'm tempted by a captaincy that I'll talk about as we get to slightly later on in the pod. No spoilers here. If we go back to you, Sammy, especially subject, of course, Liverpool. So assuming that Salah and Trent, well, you can assume if you don't want, well, you can or you cannot assume. What would your free of choice be from Liverpool if you could have any assets in the game currently?
Interesting question. Because obviously they're now leading up to the cup final, so I'd anticipate a little bit more rotation. I would say Alisson now enters the debate. I'm not sure he'd necessarily be the number one. I still think I'd probably have Salah over Mane and Diaz, over Mane in that midfield selection, because Salah's already had a little bit of rest and rotation. I think that's going to come Mane's way in the next couple of games. And yeah, I mean, you could just say Mane. The other one is not really cost effective to have them all. I don't think it's that bad having Trent, Robertson and in that double defensive situation. But the thing that Liverpool have now is Tsimikas and recently incorporated Joe Gomez in as fullback cover in games that they feel that they're confident enough to rotate in. So having got that set up now, they can rotate, and ahead of 2 cup finals coming up, they will rotate. Trent and Robertson won't play every Premier League game now to the end of the season. I can safely state that. So it's just about trying to sort of read, if you like, the situation, which is hard enough as it is. But for me, I think the 3, if I had unlimited bankroll to put in now, would be Salah, Mane and Alisson, to be perfectly honest.
Interesting. My follow-up question, which you kind of touched on, was going to be, I think, based on what we've seen, you'd probably say that Robertson is maybe due a rest, because I know Trent had his rest in the league game, didn't he? And the way Klopp's been talking is that Robertson will probably get a rest. I think he came off for like 10 minutes in the Champions League game, but it's not really a full rest, is it? So
no.
Also on that, just to add, Klopp's comments was that he basically would have rotated the entire back 4 if he could have, but felt that was too much. So like you say, that does really imply that Robertson will be getting a rest very shortly. I'd imagine he'd only play one of the next 2.
But while we're on it, what do you think about Matip playing all the league games, Sam?
Well, he seems to like Konate in Europe. I think the centre-back situation is the only defender that you can almost guarantee is going to play every game is Van Dijk, because when Van Dijk isn't there, it's a problem. And when all of the others aren't there, you kind of have suitable replacements now. So, yeah, I mean, Matip, yeah, I don't know. I think Matip plays the Champions League final. I do think Matip starts the Champions League final. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which route they go down exactly. I wouldn't be so sure as to say Matip will play every Premier League game for the rest of the season, to be honest. I think I could see a situation where Konate plays. Even Konate might play against Spurs. I think wouldn't surprise me, just for the pace and the physicality against Son. If he's fit, having played on Tuesday, but the Tuesday evening to Saturday evening turnaround is much kinder than the Wednesday evening to Saturday early kickoff that they saw in the Villarreal first leg. So there's definitely scope for some more, I won't say changes, but curveballs to come our way on that one, really.
Yeah, we'll rule out Matip then, based on your analysis of that one. I think
I wouldn't go Matip personally, no.
Yeah, I just think he's quite a bit cheaper, isn't he, compared to some of the other ones?
I think you could only really make a case for Van Dijk being the only one of those defenders that's going to play every Premier League game to the end of the season. And if Liverpool don't win a game, like all of a sudden, let's say this weekend Spurs nick a win against Liverpool, at that point, and City win, they go 4 points clear. Are they really going to slip up twice? It's highly unlikely. So then, would you just full send the whole setup for the FA Cup and the Champions League? I think probably you do. I'd love us to go the whole way and try and push on all fronts the whole time, but it's not a sustainable approach unless you're actively in all of the competitions. So this City side aren't going to slip up twice on the run in their remaining 4 games. So they're very unlikely going to slip up once. So just got to try and be realistic, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting one going through, like, for the final few weeks, like 37, 38. Thinking if you could get rid of a Trent, and obviously that's a lot of value that you could use elsewhere. So it's an interesting one to watch out for. I feel like we have to link it back to your team, Charlie. If it was a free hit, or if we talk about must-have Arsenal assets, is there anyone really outside of Saka? I would argue that Ramsdale's not particularly essential at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree, to be honest. We've really suffered defensively, particularly, I don't want to keep going on about it, but particularly since losing Partey and Tierney, that's really suffered, and the loss of Tomiyasu as well. So that's 2 of our back 4 and the player that was kind of screening them as well. So, yeah, I think on a free hit, I wouldn't be going near Ramsdale, particularly that Tottenham game. I'd be expecting Tottenham to score. Maybe against Leeds we'll keep a clean sheet, but yeah, I wouldn't be confident of anything more than 1 clean sheet out of the 2 there. And then in terms of attacking wise, yeah, I don't think I'd venture outside of Saka. I think maybe you'd throw in Nketiah for the value pick if you're trying to use the money elsewhere. But again, I wouldn't be that surprised if, and it depends on the kind of game we're playing for, but if Lacazette comes in for the derby, just because of his experience and his work rate and his kind of hold-up play, I think will be more valuable in that Tottenham game than Nketiah's kind of pace and ability to run in behind. But again, like I say, it would depend on the type of game that's going to turn out to be based on the games before that. And then, the other attacking assets I think are just not as reliable as maybe similar value options elsewhere. So I think really it's only Saka I'd be going for from Arsenal if I was having a complete free choice.
Yeah, I don't think I can disagree really, but I do have Nketiah in the team, which, as you mentioned, mainly for the value, because obviously on bench boost, he's like one of the best value forwards. And obviously hoping that he plays both of those games. I think you're likely to get probably at least a game and then maybe some minutes in the other game. So I think he's a decent bet at least.
Yeah, I would be pretty confident he starts that Leeds game. And like I say, I think Lacazette will start the Spurs game. But also, I don't think there's a single game where Nketiah, between now and the end of the season, Nketiah won't at least feature. He always will get brought on regardless of the score, regardless of the situation in the game, because Lacazette can't finish a game at the moment, just because of his fitness and just general age. I think he just can't seem to run a full 90 because he just works himself into the ground. So yeah, I would agree. He'd probably get at least maybe 70 minutes in the first game and maybe like 30 off the bench in the second.
I think I'd just about take that, given his value of like 5.5 million. So you can't really complain that kind of value of an asset, can you? So we will take that. So we stay in North London and come back to you, Sam. So you could argue that Spurs have the most difficult double game week. I know we've kind of touched on Son earlier, but Spurs have got Liverpool away and then at home to Arsenal. If people have got 2 or 3 Spurs assets, would you say be holding on to them, or should you be getting rid of a few, or just keeping on Son, for example? What would you be recommending?
Well, Spurs have got a pretty good 37, 38, right? So I think you could probably look at, as long as if you have set transfer plans for 37, 38 already, then probably look to keep hold of them. I don't think there's too much concern in getting rid of them. I also think basically as long as you've got Son, you're okay in a lot of coverage in that midfield. I mean, Son, Salah, like these anchor point scorers have just delivered consistently every single week this season, near enough. So it's almost like it doesn't even really matter too much if you've got other options from those teams that are returning, that aren't returning, because it's so sort of sporadic, the points outside of the core options this year. I think you could probably make a case for having Son and maybe one other Spurs midfielder till the end of the season if you wanted to. And equally, if you have a Spurs defender, I think there's no real panic to get rid of them based on the fixture. They've got 37 and 38. But I wouldn't really be looking to transfer Spurs players out now and then just transfer them back in for 37, 38, unless you're playing a free hit or something like that.
Yeah, it's a good point about the 37, 38, because I don't think you could get really much better fixtures than that. I'm pretty sure 38 is Norwich, isn't it? I think it's Norwich and Burnley they've got.
Yeah.
So relating to the comment you said about the free hit as well, so I think if you're on a free hit, and obviously it's probably works quite well with the Spurs assets, because if you've got loads coming into the game week and you're going to use your free hit this game week, you can get rid of, well, you might just want to leave Son in there, but get rid of the rest, because you might not get a big benefit from like a defender, but then you'll have them back for 37 and 38, so that does work quite well. Obviously, it is still a double game week, so you've still got a bit of like Son or Kane could go off at any point, because you could easily see them scoring in both of those games if they're on form Spurs. So it's
I was watching. Sorry, I was catching up with one of Andy's videos earlier, and he was basically saying about how Son goes through these periods where he like massively outperforms his XG, and Kane goes through these periods where he massively underperforms his XG. But there will be a point where it just flips, and like that sort of pendulum swings completely the other way. And if it just seems to me that that's unlikely going to happen in the remaining 4 games of this season, unless Spurs get to a point where they've got nothing to play for, and then it gets to sort of game week 37, 38, at which point Kane is probably like a really, really good option, because he's going to play, so might as well just send it in at that point. But I don't think there's too much value in just decimating your Spurs assets this week, because they've got a tough double game week, because they've probably got the offset of that the other side.
I was going to add this to that part as well. What do you think about the fact that Son is only 3 goals behind Salah in the Golden Boot race? Do you think there's a possibility that he might get penalties off Kane at some point, because he's obviously got something to be going for?
Just to come in quickly as a quick European update, Man City have just scored. They are now 5-3 up on aggregate. Also, just an interesting side note as well, it comes a few minutes after KDB was just subbed. Not for an injury, he just looked a bit leggy. So I think everything there just plays into Man City assets go.
Well, you could kill it on KDB then, didn't they? Like, perform better as soon as he goes off. So that means Sterling's definitely playing. So we were throw off there, weren't we? Yeah. So what did you think about that?
I think, but possibly. I guess it depends how much it means to those players, like golden boots and stuff like that. Ironically, it's Mahrez who scored the goal. So there's your exchange versus Sterling. I think Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't read too much into about Golden Boot. It might be like if Son's like a goal behind on the last day of the season, then yeah, Kane might go for it. But Spurs are still like in with a realistic shout of top four, so they're not going to mess around with Golden Boots while there's Champions League places on the line. Like, imagine if Kane gave a penalty to Son that he missed, ended up drawing a game and missed out on top four by a point. It's like, come on, that's like, yeah.
It's probably more.
So yeah, I wouldn't worry.
Yeah, probably 37, 38 might have a slight chance, but probably definitely not in this game week with the Liverpool and Arsenal games. But just one to keep an eye out going forward.
Yeah.
Don't forget to watch out for Ronaldo in that Golden Boot race. Jokes aside, of course. So back to you, Charlie. I wanted to touch a little bit on rotation in the double game weeks. So we kind of touched on certain fixtures either side. So I wanted to talk about Chelsea and Leicester. So Chelsea have got the FA Cup final a few days after the second fixture in a double game week, so you could see rotation there. And then Leicester have got Europe tomorrow, so you could see rotation. They might rotate the whole team in the league from now on, all we know, especially if they get to the final. What would you be doing with a Chelsea or a Leicester asset currently?
Well, it depends on who, right? I think Chelsea depends. Yeah, like I say, it depends on who. I think for Chelsea, Mount, I would be tempted to keep just because he plays so much, and he just has such a good engine on him that I think if for example Tuchel was thinking about who would be comfortable playing both the double game week and then the final after that, I think Mount would be high on that list of being able to play them all. Whereas maybe look at someone like, I don't know, I would be probably expecting a Reece James benching in one of them, maybe just because of the recency of his injury and coming back from it. But because of his potential, I'm still happy keeping him. I don't see any reason to get rid. And maybe someone like Alonso, similarly, if you've got him, I don't see any reason to get rid. They're likely not going to swap him out anyway because of a lack of options. They've got people that aren't necessarily left wing backs, but for example, they've played Saul there before and whoever else. I think Sarr as well, although he had a horrible game. They've got potential options, but I think those kind of assets, I think anyone really from Chelsea outside of maybe Havertz, who I don't see really getting a lot of points here. If you've got a reasonable move to make, I wouldn't mind getting rid of him. But the rest, I think I would just keep and you just ride whatever game time they get. I think they all start at least one game of the two, and that's enough for me. And then they probably get appearances in the next anyway. In terms of, you mentioned Leicester, I think, it's complete hit or miss. I don't think any of their striking options are FPL options. So like Vardy, Daka, Iheanacho, it could be any one of the three that plays, or two of the three even sometimes. The midfield, again, like Sam touched on earlier, I think Maddison's probably a sell if you're using it wisely. I think if you're not sure what to do, I don't think you would just get rid of him for the sake of it. But yeah, I fully expect that Leicester team to be completely rotated in that first game of the double game week, following their work in the Europe game before that, and then like you say, it could be rotation going forwards as well. I don't think I'd have anyone from the Leicester team outside of that, even if they weren't playing. So, I think I'd probably move on Leicester assets.
I've got two Leicester assets in the team. I was going to just say a shout out for Kasper Schmeichel, because I think he is probably the one that I would argue you would have from Leicester. I think realistically, outside of him, you'd probably try to avoid them. But I think Schmeichel, even when we've seen rotation, he's never been rotated. So obviously, I'm hoping he doesn't get rotated across these last few weeks.
I agree with that, but also struggle, regardless of. On paper, those fixtures are ones he should be getting something in, but Leicester aren't really playing to their paper value, if we use that. I wouldn't be surprised if they just concede in all of their games remaining from the rest of the season, regardless of the people they're playing. I think that their defence is just so over the place. I think rotation in a team is most affects the defence. If your defence isn't able to be solid and consistent, that really causes issues. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they just concede anyway. So you'd be hoping for the save points and the appearance points and just from the sheer number of games. But also, if for example you were taking a free hit this week, I don't think I'd go Schmeichel just because of the players in front of him will be letting him down.
I think I'll stick with the percentages that they're playing Norwich and Watford within the next 2 weeks and hope that of all the teams that aren't going to score, I'll be one of them. But, well, yeah, I'm not going to change him now, but Schmeichel will be in, along with Foster, in the bench boost team. So let's hope. Well, as long as Norwich can score as long as it's Timo Pukki, because he's also in the team. So it's a bit of a strange one when you've got two players against each other. There was just one other question I had about the double game weeks. It was going to go to Sam, but I think half of it has already been answered because it's Everton related, so I might have to skim over that bit. I was just going to get your thoughts, Sam, on Aston Villa and Everton for the next few weeks, because they both have 2 fixtures this week and then 2 fixtures in game week 37. And I think we mentioned a bit about Coutinho earlier, didn't we, and Ramsey. So I think I could probably answer this question myself, but if you're looking at Villa, I think you're quite positive, and Everton slightly less positive because you've got a slight issue with the team. I wonder why.
Yeah, I think probably more positive about. I wouldn't necessarily just say outright positive for Villa, because Villa recently have been woeful, and they don't just become a good team just because they've got a double game week. I think there is something to be said that you are quite right in that Everton are in a scrap. They've got things to play for. Villa probably are 1 win away from being safe, like fully safe. At which point they just they're on the beach then. Which is a shame because we need them to do a job against City on the last day of the season, to be honest. But I think that's probably wishful thinking. I think if I had to pinpoint one of those 2 sides to take assets from, I wouldn't take defensive assets from either. And then you'd be looking at creative options, of which, let's be real, there aren't too many, because otherwise they probably wouldn't be in the positions that they are, respectively. But yeah, I mean, Coutinho, this obvious shout for Villa. Ollie Watkins isn't bad, but there's 7.5 million of striker that's probably better used elsewhere throughout your team. Jacob Ramsey has only really sprung into my mind this evening, so it'd be a bit sort of reckless to just recommend him. You make a good case for Richarlison, in all seriousness. Everton have got to score some goals to win some games in order to stay in the league, and they have to stay in the league. If Everton get relegated this year, that will be the biggest shock, probably, and maybe the biggest shock. That's on par with Leicester winning the league, I think, if Everton go down. That's insane. That is insane. So, I think we just got to think realistically about the fact that both these guys have double game weeks with good fixtures on paper. That doesn't necessarily make them good teams, and that we should all move to their assets straight away.
Definitely a good point. I think probably you might want 1 or 2 kind of from those teams, but I wouldn't say go for 6, like 3 from each. It's overdoing it a bit, especially in this game week as well, where you've got like City, Liverpool that are doubling as well. There's better. You made a good point with a striker like that. 7.5 million on a striker could maybe get you from maybe like a Havertz to a KDB as an example. So it's probably picking the right players from those teams rather than just getting every single player in there. There are 4 other teams that also have a double game week, just to mention, but I'm not particularly going to go into detail on these 4 because I don't think in FPL at this point they give a lot of value. You've got Wolves, who have got City and Chelsea, very difficult, and Wolves haven't got anything to play for. Leeds, you could say Rafinha, but they've got Arsenal and Chelsea, which is again hard fixtures. And then there's also Watford and Norwich, who are basically down. So the only cases I'd make for Watford or Norwich is maybe a cheap striker if you need him on a bench boost. So, for example, I've got Pukki. I'm not really going to change him. There's not much value in me changing him, and I think Sam's got Dennis. I'm not sure if Dennis will still be in your team, but they give a bit of decent value up front. So I don't mind those strikers from those 2 teams, but I won't be going anywhere else with those 4 teams in general. So the last section will be captaincy. So back to you, Charlie. Who are your ideas for captain, and who are you currently leaning towards?
I don't know. I mean, Salah's obviously always the first sort of name we put on the list. and I think he's as good as any, really, in those fixtures. And as long as they're still in for the title, I don't see why not. If I was going to be looking elsewhere, like we said, it's probably your Man City asset of choice. I interestingly note that Gabriel Jesus has also been subbed in the game today, so just a bit of an interesting one to put back on everyone's minds. I know Sam talked about him as a potential striker to bring in, so that's also in my thoughts as well, instead of Richarlison, but we'll see. And then outside of them two, I don't think I'd go Son just because of those fixtures. I think you could probably just get better choices elsewhere. I mean, it's not bad games. I'd be happy having him, but I don't think I'd want to captain him in those two. I don't think I'd want to go outside of that, so I think it does come down to Salah or your Man City asset.
When he said your Man City asset, and then he put choice at the end, I'm like, what? He's gone full circle. He's like, all back to Sterling. I'm like, what's going on?
No. So, I mean, I would expect if you're keeping Sterling, you're hoping for a certain number of starts or enough appearances that justify keeping him, and therefore you would be prepared to captain him. That would be that's probably a better response to your Sterling question. If you were prepared to captain him, then I'd keep him. If you're not prepared to captain him, I'll get rid.
Yeah, there's no chance I'm captaining him, so that kind of...
Then I'd say get rid of him. Especially now that KDB and Jesus have both gone off, I would be happy bringing in both of those.
And Mahrez has gone off as well. It's only a few minutes, but you never know. But yeah, I wasn't thinking of captaining Sterling last week. He's definitely not going to get captained this week, so don't worry about that one. I'm fully expecting him to get 90 minutes, and the only way he's going to play that second game is like if he hits a hat-trick, so that's realistically probably not going to happen. But yeah, if I take him out, of course it'll happen, but we'll see. I think I'm very similar to you. That was literally my thinking before you said it. Literally Salah or a City asset is currently what I'd be sitting on. Where are you sitting currently, Sam, with ideas of captaincy?
Salah.
Easy as that.
Yeah, job done. Yeah. It's just every time I haven't captained him this season, he's had a decent return. It will be Salah. I've captained him a lot this season with good reason, and he's had good returns. He scores a lot. He's got good record against Spurs. Liverpool tend to get a higher average number of penalties against Spurs than any other team in the Premier League. So Salah's on penalties. I think there's a case to be seen there that if Liverpool get a penalty and Salah's on the pitch, he's probably taking it. So it'll be Salah for me.
I fully expect Salah to be the most captained across the board on the game this week, and obviously his ownership's so high anyway. I think if he goes off and you don't have him captain, you're going to struggle quite significantly.
I think Sam sold me there, and like I needed another reason to hope Liverpool absolutely batter Spurs. I think having Salah captain will just top that off as well.
Well, I was tempted to keep the armband on exactly the same player as I did on last week and keep it on Cancelo, but it's quite a convincing argument by Sam because I had Cancelo captain and Salah vice, but it might get swapped around. I think. I'm not sure. I'll have to keep an eye on Walker because I think if Walker plays for City, Cancelo is better going forward. But like you said, Charlie, he was limping and I saw he went off. So might revert back to Salah. And I think the pressure of that, there's going to be so many people captaining him as well. Like I could have a great bench boost, but then Salah goes off as well, and so it probably neutralises some of the effect. So might be the safest option. The fact that I've got another 14 players that I hope can get the points at the same time, that might be the best option in the situation. So yeah, from Sam's one-word answer to start with, he's managed to convince us all the way around to Salah. But in fairness, Salah generally doesn't take a lot of convincing to make captain of anyway. I think the last 5 to 10 game weeks we probably had a bit of doubt about it, but before that we didn't really have any doubt about Salah at all. So I think that kind of rounds up everything that we want to talk about. Did either of you want to add anything else on there?
No, all good.
No.
Yep, good stuff. So thank you both, and well, half of your appearance, Sam. I was quite right at the start, Charlie. I was quite right. I said we'd kind of have 2.5 men. I think that kind of worked out pretty legitimately there. But yeah, I appreciate you both coming on again, and we should be back. I think. Well, you're actually off, aren't you, next week? So I think we were saying. So I think it'll probably be me and Charlie next week. But I think it'll probably be back on the Tuesday as usual. But that for now, signing off. Just as City are probably qualified for the Champions League final. Well, as soon as I say that, Real Madrid have equalised. Perfect timing to sign off. But we shall be back next week, and we will see you again next time. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a great evening.